fire coming from this line. Captain, come around, pick up our trailer. We're taking fire from 4 different places. That was quite a bit of fire there.
Wall heading east, going low level.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Low Level Hell Podcast, episode 7. I want to make sure that everyone's clear that this one is episode 7. I kept saying it last time, I guess it just had it on the brain, but this one is definitely episode 7. I am your host, Brian, and with me is Big Game Hunter Kelly. How you doing?
Big Game Hunter. Boy, we've been doing that a little bit lately, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. So for listeners, if you're looking for an escape, take a look at this game. It's the Hunter Call of the Wild, which is exactly that, a hunting simulation. It's absolutely absurd and beautiful at the same time.
It's ridiculous.
We're having way too much fun with it.
It's for people who actually don't actually go hunting and don't want to go get dirty. So, but it's kind of the same experience. That's pretty
yeah.
cool.
I mean, hunting, I've tried it. It's not for me. As you know, I'm impatient by nature, but I don't like to wake up early and I don't like to be cold. And that seemed to be the theme of hunting, and I just couldn't get behind it. But
yeah, this is like hunting for nerds.
It's so beautiful and just ridiculous at the same time. But yeah, check it out. It's a lot of fun. Call of the Wild. So
yeah, it's a pretty good game. So hey, it's a new year, man. So I know this last year's was pretty hectic with everything going on, but what's your kind of your expectations for 2021? What you got planned?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the show is at a good place, considering we started 2 months ago. I know we're getting out there and getting after it. We've got a lot of great guests lined up here in the next couple months, and it seems like a week goes by that I don't talk to somebody else who's got an interesting story. So, the challenge for me at this point is really just scheduling everyone and getting it all lined up and trying to figure out which guest do you put on first, because as soon as you get something lined up, somebody else pops up and you're like, man, that would be a good one too. But
you just line them up.
It's a difficult, terrible situation to be in, but these are the kind of problems you want to have.
Yep.
But yeah, it's been going good. And I mean, as you know, we've struggled quite a bit with the whole website fiasco, and finally, after a couple of weeks, figured out what we did wrong. And ladies and gentlemen, we're building the airplane in flight, and but at least we got it off the ground, and I think we're in a good place. So we do have that website set up, the lowlevelhellpodcast.com, and that's got links to how to email us if you got questions, how to learn a little bit about us, and link you to our Instagram, which we just set up, and link you to our Facebook page. And really, the Instagram is going to be fun, because what I'm trying to get every guest that comes on is, hey, send me some pictures from your deployments or training and things like that, and we'll throw those up there as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, I mean, it's going to be hard to beat, some of your past stuff already. I mean, you're only in this for like 2 months, right? And you've already hit some big milestones already, right? So, weren't you just on the Afterburn podcast and the Fighter Pilot podcast? Weren't you interviewing on those? I think I heard you on those. How did that go? How did you enjoy that?
Yeah, so Jello over at the Fighter Pilot podcast has been super helpful. We spoke very early on in this whole situation, and he was gracious enough to have us on to do a quick promo for the show, and that was a big bump. And then that just kind of led to some other conversations. Yeah, I was just on the Air Combat Sim podcast talking about, for our simulation fans, the DCS community. We talked a little bit about Apaches and just helicopters in general within that construct. And then, I was just on with John Waters over there on his podcast, Afterburn, and that was a lot of fun. Got to be on the other side of the mic, I guess you could say.
Yeah, you're dropping the knowledge bombs.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have him on, and I completely plan to nerd out on F-16 stuff, because I grew up around F-16s, growing up around MacDill Air Force Base, and they were always flying overhead, and I like them. Even though I think I'm too tall to have ever flown one anyway, like I had a chance, but if I could have, I don't think I would have fit. I remember talking to a guy years ago, and he's like, oh yeah, you're too tall. They wouldn't have let you in.
Yeah, how tall are you? What are you, like 6'3"?
6'5".
6'5"? Surprised you fit in a helicopter. My goodness. Yeah,
well,
you wouldn't fit in an F-16, that's for sure.
No, probably not. But, funny story, when I took my first flight physical, they do all these measurements and stuff. And the guy measured my sitting height. And he's like, well, you're disqualified. I said, well, why? He says, well, the requirement is 100, no more than 101 sitting height centimeters. and you're 102. And I was like, well, can you measure me again? And I compressed myself as hard as I could in that seat. And he's like, all right, yeah, you're good.
Holy smokes.
And then when I went to, when I was in flight school, they said, okay, if you want to fly Kiowas, you can only be 95 centimeters sitting height. And I was like, well, I guess I'll never fly Kiowas, you know? And then we got right up to the point where they were picking aircraft. And I was like, I don't, is that true? And so I made the cadre there do some investigating, and they call out and they're like, no, that's old stuff. So in the Kiowa Warrior, they have, the roof essentially above your head is kind of bowed up,
right?
Versus the old school. Because when I did fly the old, what they call the Alpha Chuck model for a couple weeks in a certain phase of training, and it was incredibly uncomfortable. I mean, I basically flew with my head cocked to the side for 2 weeks or whatever. Yeah, it was miserable. So, but plenty of headroom. Even though I did occasionally turn on the infrared anti-collision light because the switch was behind us, behind the head. And so when I was wearing my night vision goggles, you got like the battery cable that would go from the goggles to the battery pack in the back of your helmet. And if I didn't like tighten it down on something, I would turn my head and flick that switch. And I remember an instructor pilot was flying behind me one time, and he's like, hey, why do you guys keep turning your collision lights on and off? And
we don't want to get hit.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, no, you would definitely not fit into an F-16. I sat in one of those, and I think the thing about the 16 that really surprised me is how far the joystick actually moved, right? The flight stick is like maybe an inch this way, maybe an inch to the other way. And I'm like, how do you have precision? I mean, it'd be an interesting question to ask somebody who flies a 16 is like, the controls are so minute on the right. Yeah. How do you have the accuracy that those guys have, especially things like the Thunderbirds, when they're flying pretty close. Yeah. But it's a super interesting aircraft.
Yeah, I'd heard that about the F-16 is, it's, you even think about turning and you're turning because you're just twitching, your hand. And it's funny that you mentioned that because I'd never even paid attention to it until I started playing around with those VR goggles I got and jumping into DCS. And I looked down at the joystick and I was like, man, that thing is barely moving.
Yeah, so, no doubt. I think you fly it more by consciousness than you do by touch, So
yeah.
You got to think about what you want to do,
Yeah, no, it would definitely take some getting used to. But we'll definitely get into that with him because I'm curious, and I'm sure that a lot of our listeners are curious as well. But I know it'll be sacrilege to have a jet guy on the podcast. But as I have pointed out, I don't want to stay completely in the helicopter realm. If it's air to ground, I'm interested in it. I think it'd be a good show. So.
Well, I mean, it's really just aviation in general, right? And not even sometimes. Maybe not even just military aviation, right? You have a lot of civilian aviation as well, and there's a lot of mix between the two, right? You have a lot of military pilots that come out and go to civilian, and they got great histories in both. And as you know, civilian flying is way different than military flying, and it's really two different styles of being a pilot. There's a lot of difference between that military pilot and the civilian pilot, but just having helicopter pilots on, this is a community, and the community is not only just helicopter guys, but it's fighter pilots as well, and heavy lift, and it's going to be, all sorts of different types of pilots. Pilot is a pilot, whether it flies an ultralight or it flies a C-12 or a something heavy, C-5, for instance. It's a pilot is a pilot, and that makes great community.
Yeah, and I mean everyone's got some good stories, and that's really what we're about here. Yeah. Well, speaking of stories, I mean, I think we've got some good ones today. We're going to talk to Andrew Maxwell, who is a Marine Corps Huey pilot, and he's currently stationed out in Okinawa. And we recently spent some time, actually right around Christmas time, and had a quick conversation about his experiences as a Huey pilot. So I hope you guys enjoy. Hey everybody, today we're joined by Andrew Maxwell, who's a United States Marine and flies UH-1 Hueys. How you doing, Andrew?
Hey Brian, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me this morning in Okinawa. So
yeah, it's a Saturday morning in Okinawa and a Friday night here in the States on the East Coast. How's the weather out there? Does it get pretty cold there or what?
No, it's pretty subtropical climate here. The last few weeks it has dropped into the 60s probably, but lots of rain. But yeah, 60 is about as cold as it's going to get out here.
Yeah, I guess I was looking at a map the other day because I was trying to make sure time zones and all that stuff. And Okinawa is actually south of Korea, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's about It's probably about a 2-hour flight up to Korea, Seoul or anywhere up in the peninsula there. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I spent a little time in Korea. It definitely gets cold there. So.
Oh yeah.
Ridiculously. In fact, the coldest I've ever been, I think it was -20. I left Florida when I came on active duty. I left Florida and it was 70 degrees, and I arrived in Korea. It was February, and it was like -20 at night. So.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I actually my first assignment out here in Okinawa was flying the UC-12 for the Marine Corps, and so I would leave MCAS Fatenma, which is the Marine Corps Air Station on Okinawa, fly up to like Pohang, and it's January here, probably 70, 75 degrees, so no jacket, no anything, warming layers. Roll into Pohang, and it's -10, and I'm just trying to gas up the plane, just freezing. So yeah, it's a rude awakening.
Yeah, totally. Definitely got to check the weather. All right. Well, let's just do kind of a quick bio and just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got into the Marines, if you did anything before flying, and where you're at now.
Yeah, sure thing, Brian. So yeah, I was born in East Coast of Florida. Born and raised there. My whole family's,
You got to tell me where now.
Melbourne.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
I'm a Tampa guy, so.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my godfather lives in Tampa, actually like up north of Tampa in Odessa. So yeah, he lives up there. I've been to Tampa plenty of times, but yeah, my whole family is in Florida still. Sister in Orlando, parents are in Cocoa, kind of relocated over the years, but yeah, I grew up there. I come from a pretty long background of military service, so it was from a young age. It was like not a matter of if, but just when and how I went about joining. So graduated high school and went up to Virginia, actually, to college at VMI, which is pretty hot in the news lately. Went up there, did my first year. It was 2003, so obviously OIF and everything is really kicking into high gear at that point. Being a 19-year-old hard charger, I was worried I was going to miss the fight. So I went down to the recruiter in Lexington, Virginia, talked to him, had everything lined up, told my dad. My dad was a Marine, and my godfather, actually, that I was telling you about, was a Marine with my dad as well. So they drive up to Virginia, take me out to dinner, try to convince me that it's a terrible idea to enlist. They're like, just finish college, commission. You can do it that way too. I was like, okay. They left to go back to Florida. I went back to Lexington and told the recruiter I was ready to sign up.
No.
So signed up, and then after my first year at college, I went into the reserves. So that was kind of the middle ground, I guess you could say. So went into the reserves, did Paris Island in the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. And then got back to school if I back up. So if anyone's familiar with Marine Corps boot camp, you have range week, and then there's like team week. I don't know what they call it now, but I was donating blood. And that's the only time I'll ever donate blood, because I wasn't getting yelled at that point. So I signed up. I'm like, yeah, I'll donate blood for sure. Apple juice and cookies afterwards. Okay.
I think I did the same thing.
Yeah, it's a perfect excuse to get out of the squad bay for an hour and be treated like a human being. I'm sitting there, and my buddy, it was a bunch of us from VMI that went through boot camp that summer. And he's like, hey, the unit we're going to is going to Iraq next year. And so I kind of found out then that, okay, this is happening. So now we finish boot camp, get back to VMI, do our first drill weekend. And the captain was like, hey, if you guys want to go, I can make it happen. But if you don't want to go, I totally understand. And, a bunch of us were like, no, we're going. And he pulled some strings, got us down to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. We did all of our, MOS school. So we were all combat engineers. Did that, and then did our, I guess you guys like AIT. We do a similar training there at Camp Geiger, which is just adjacent to MCS New River. Did that, and then headed out to 29 Palms for 2 months or so, pre-deployment leave in Vegas, and then went over to Iraq in 2005 with a infantry company. It was with 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines, Lima Company, and I was stationed at Haditha Dam, which is in the not Helmand, Al Anbar. Getting my countries mixed up, but in the Anbar province.
It all blurs together after a while.
Yeah, it's all the same, right? So it was there for 6 months, just attached to a infantry platoon, going out and clearing houses. Anything they found that was kind of explosive concern, they'd usually grab an engineer, and we would handle that.
Okay.
So did that, and we kind of go back to that, but that's kind of where there was one operation on that thing, and this is kind of where it comes full circle, I guess, to tying this back into aviation and where I'm at today. We were in it was in May of 2005. Operation Matador. It's also known as the Battle for Al Qaim, up by Syria. We were up there. We rode Amtraks in, big tracked amphibious vehicle that it's got a 50 cal and a 40 millimeter grenade launcher on the top, we rode those into town, dismount, and then we just basically swept from one side of the city to the other side of the city. And I just remember a real sticky spot that day. I look up and I just hear Huey and a Cobra overhead. And it was at that time, everything just kind of went calm on the ground. Shooting stopped. And we were like, man, if we could just have them on the overhead, the entire time we're out here, like, this would be amazing. So that's kind of, I was like, all right, I'm going to do that somehow. I didn't know how, like whether I was going to go active duty enlisted and be a crew chief or finish college and fly them, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. So that's kind of your full circle thing with that.
Okay. All right. So how did you get there then? You were an engineer. How did you become a pilot?
Yep. So after this deployment, went back to VMI, struggled a lot with kind of the transition back to an academic setting, and especially at a school where they're trying to mold future leaders and give you that military experience. And I was kind of like, well, I've already got that. Like I've been there and I got the t-shirt. So I struggled
back
a little
at
bit.
That time it was feast or famine, right? You had a lot of guys who'd been to combat, but then you had a lot that hadn't been. It wasn't, 5 years later, you had a hard time finding anybody who hadn't deployed yet. But 04, 05, even 06 timeframe, it was a little bit of a mix up. So
yeah, definitely. And there was a good group of, like I said earlier, a bunch of us from VMI, we all deployed with the same company. So we were all back at school. And then, but yeah, a lot of the staff, there was a couple from the Gulf War. General P, he's Army brother of yours. He was there, but obviously so far removed from the cadets that are at school. But yeah, a couple of peers that had deployed, some Army guys that had gone over. But it was a unique experience. I don't think VMI was really, any school really would be well equipped at that time to handle that kind of thing. No. But finished up school. I ended up graduating a year and a half late. So originally I was a class of 07. I graduated in December of 08 out of VMI, and ended up for Marine officers. There's a couple of different ways you can go about becoming an officer. Obviously, there's if you're active duty enlisted, you can go MESEP, which is the Marine Enlisted Commissioning. I think the other E is for education program, but it's basically enlisted to officer. So you go to OCS one summer for 10 weeks, finish up college, and then you're commissioned. The route I did was the PLC, the platoon leaders course. So I went 2 summers in a row, to Quantico for a 6-week session each summer. And, OCS, it's the same for everyone. Academics, a lot of PT, just counting down your days until you're done for the summer. Finished that, commissioned in December after graduation, and then started TBS, which is the basic school in Quantico. It's a 6-month course for newly commissioned Marine Corps officers and warrant officers. Basically makes you a basic infantry platoon commander. So you go through land nav, basic tactics, and learn how to lead a rifle platoon. Because, every Marine and rifleman, they still hold pretty true to that. So knocked that out. And then, went down to Pensacola. I listened to the last podcast with the Navy lieutenant from Washington that's out flying SAR. So the flight school process was exactly the same for me. I was listening for any changes, but I think he went through about 2 to 3 years after me, but everything's the same. API, I did all my flight school in Pensacola. So I went up to Whiting, north, flew the T-34 up there, and then selected helicopters. The process for us is exactly the same. I think we had to list all of the platforms possible for the Marine Corps, which was helicopters, tilt rotor, jets, or C-130. They were still doing guys in the Prowler at that point, which they've since, sundowned and gotten rid of the Prowler. But you rack and stack just like anything else. I think I did have helicopters first, and then I went through this weird phase where I was like, oh, Ospreys sound cool. So I think those might have been second, and then like C-130s and jets. But I got what I wanted. So I just went to the Southfield and flew the TH-57. Had a great time doing that. All the stories that he, what was his name? Lieutenant, or his first name?
Alex. Yeah.
Alex. Okay. Yeah. So at least I can use his name. So all the stories Alex was saying were exactly the same, like the cool cross countries. I didn't go to Key West. I went to I think I went to Nashville or Memphis, and then I went to Charleston. We had a great time doing that. I was able to, just like he did afterwards, went down to Pensacola, and you said like that old guy came out and gave did the gouge prep for the test. Yeah. Took that test and got all my civilian ratings and things like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good opportunity. I know guys that didn't do that at flight school and then kicked themselves, years down the road that they had never done that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to take advantage of it, and we can talk later about some of the other things that I've been able to tack on, like just on the Marine Corps' dime, which is awesome. Mm. But so got those ratings, and then again another rack and stack, put your dream sheet in. So our list was pretty extensive then coming out of advanced and Whiting. So I went back and forth a lot. I was like, am I going to go 53s and fly the big iron, or go a little bit tactical, get into the Huey? I knew I wanted to do something that could carry Marines in the back. I was I wasn't opposed to the Cobra, but I liked the diversity that the Huey and the 53 offered. They kind of do a little bit of everything. Yeah. I put. Yeah, go ahead.
That makes sense with your background. It sounds to me like, you were a guy that could have benefited from that on the ground as far as being carried around. You were an engineer doing some infantry guy stuff. So you were, kind of cross training. So it seems to lend itself to, you want to be able to kind of touch all those things.
Yeah, totally. I put Hueys, and then, so we also stack, so it's type. So model, what do you want to fly? And then where do you want to fly it? So I think I had Hueys West Coast, Hueys. At that point, they had just sent a squadron to Hawaii. So I put Hueys Hawaii, and then Hueys East Coast, and then Cobras, then 53s. And then they were still, believe it or not, sending Marines to 46s.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, my roommate actually was one of the last guys to leave flight school and go fly the 46. Now he's an Osprey pilot. They transitioned most of them pretty quickly. In fact, they didn't even leave the RAG squadron when they went to Pendleton. They went through the FRS and then they just stayed there, basically waiting to transition. So it's kind of weird, but probably an issue with funding. They'd already allocated those numbers and there's no way to change it. They were going to go, for good or bad. So, So I packed up the house, the dog, and I wasn't married at the time. So I, drove out to Pendleton, and I got there and, moved in about October of 11. Yeah. October of 11. So, got to Pendleton and then, just went through the entire syllabus flying the Huey. It's a lot like Alex's experience in the 60. I'd say a little less on the tactical application of the aircraft than what the Navy does. So we showed up and learned how to fly the thing, basic checklists. And then we do everything from terrain flight, formation flying, instruments again. We do a couple of night hops, night formation, some low-level nav routes around Southern California. And then you do a couple of shoots on Camp Pendleton there. You go out and it's called the White Rock. It's literally a white rock in the middle of the range, and you just shoot at it. So I think you do like 2 hops shooting rockets out there, and then you do the PQM check, the pilot qualified and model, NATOPS check. For me, that was, hey, plan an hour and a half route. You need to land at this many airports. They just want to make sure that you can fly the aircraft, talk on the radios, go in and out of airspace. It was really nothing tactical for me. So yeah, I flew around, went up to like the east, and then flew up to like Hemet, and then back down to Pendleton, and that was it. They're like, cool. And it's funny because they're like, all right, you're a PQM now, but when you get to the squadron, you pretty much have no leg to stand on. You're just you're the boot, and no one likes you. So they're like, yeah, that's cool. You did the 303 thing. Like you're not shit.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because that sounds a little bit more like the Army experience than the Navy experience, where it sounded like Alex was saying, you kind of show up and you're integrated right away, but you're showing up as the effing new guy.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we you finish that up, and a funny story, I guess. So my wife, I mentioned to you, in setting this up, that she's a Cobra pilot.
Yeah.
So I knew of my wife at Pendleton. She was the adjutant, but I was a lieutenant, and she was a captain. So I was like, well, I'm not gonna talk to her. Like, clearly that's a bad move. And then we linked up later on the East Coast. She was in the sister squadron of mine. So,
okay.
but it's funny how that all works out. But yeah, so I got my orders to New River over in Eastern North Carolina, right across from Camp Lejeune. So I got out there in July of 12. So you can see, obviously, like our FRS pipeline's a little shorter than I think the Navy. His is closer to a year. Ours is about 8 months, and I had a pretty significant delay in there. There had been a mishap just prior to me showing up to 303. So that delayed my start a little bit until after Christmas so I started in like January of 12, really. Got to New River, and it's a brand new syllabus, starting it all over again. It like, okay, they showed you how to start the aircraft, but now we're going to show you how to start the aircraft.
Right.
They showed you low level nav. We're going to show you low level nav. So it's a lot of like, cool, you sort of know how to do it, but we're going to show you the way. So you go through that, and yeah, you're just basically working up to be a qualified co-pilot. Most of the missions you can't even fly because you haven't done any low light flying. You've never been to the ship in a Huey, anyways. So yeah, a lot of just rinse and repeat, making you more qualified to fly an actual fleet aircraft. Yeah, so that was me getting to my first squadron.
So let's talk a little bit about the mission. You fly Hueys. What do Hueys do in the Marine Corps? Like what are the various missions that you're going to be asked to do as a Huey pilot?
Yeah, so the Hueys, it is funny. So combat engineer, same thing. Kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. We'd obviously like to think of ourselves as like, oh, I'm the master of this. I'm the go-to guy. But the Huey is really the same thing. It's jack of all trades, master of none. So you could do anything. I wrote out here, but so offensive air support, utility support, escort, airborne supporting arms coordination. So like FAC-A, call for fire, things like that. So we kind of do a little bit of everything, whether that's, obviously the biggest thing for an HMLA, the Marine Light Attack Helicopter Squadron, we have Hueys and Cobras organic to the squadron. So what you'll typically see, depending on the mission set, would be a mixed section. So you'd have a Huey and a Cobra going out as a section to fly. And I guess, there are some differences. I'm not super familiar with Army aviation, but I know that you're kind of rotary wing is a maneuver element, whereas the Marine Corps is to support the MAGTF, support the Marines on the ground. That's our whole mission. So close air support. We'll go out there and like I said, going back to Iraq, like as soon as you show up, there's like a sense of calm. I guess the Marines on the ground are like, oh, thank God the Hueys are here, the Cobras are here, or commonly referred to, they just call us skids, because we don't have wheels, we still have skid landing gear. But yeah, utility support, CASEVAC. We obviously can't do the medevac mission. We don't have the personnel or really the space to do it. So in extremis, we could pull wounded or whatever out of a battle site and take them back to rear for medical support.
Sure.
Armed escort, huge one. We do a lot. We train to it in the States, and then obviously later on in Afghanistan, we're doing armed escort a lot for the Ospreys and 53s. So did that a lot. And then the supporting arms coordination, that's kind of a higher level qual. Everyone goes through and knows basic call for fire, so we can do that. But the FAC-A, the forward air controller airborne, is a more senior level qual. And you don't see a whole lot of that outside of training.
Yeah, so that's an actual, you have to go through some sort of syllabus training to be a FAC-A, correct?
Yeah, basically it's funny. It's kind of like a tactical air control party ground school. So you go through a squadron internal ground school, essentially learn about forward air controlling. And then it's, I think it's about a week or 2 weeks long. And then you actually have a syllabus, a FAC-A syllabus. That's, I think, 3 to 5 flights before you can be designated FAC-A.
Okay. And there's, I'm certain, some sort of continuation of training that you've got to get so many controls or things like that over a 6-month period, maintain your qualification. Okay.
Yep, just like the ground side, but you're just doing it from an aircraft.
Right. So let's pull the thread a little bit. You mentioned the mixture of the squadron and aircraft flying together. That's for the Army, that is kind of a rarity. We've done it when I was a Kiowa guy. I don't want to say it was uncommon, but we would occasionally have a mission where you would have a 64 paired with a 58, and they would kind of do what I can only imagine is you guys were kind of doing the same thing, where Huey's maybe a little bit more of the scout and the Cobra's a little bit more of the gun. But But typically that was not something, in fact, I can't remember ever training that way before deployment. It was kind of one of those things that you hodgepodge together on scene. Is that something that you guys train pretty standard before deployment in your workups?
Yeah. I mean, I would never say that they're interchangeable, the Huey and the Cobra, but as far as our tactics, you fly exactly the same as you would if it was a pure section of Hueys or a mixed section Huey and Cobra. There are, obviously some missions where you would be like, okay, this is definitely going to be a pure Huey section. Typically more assault support oriented mission. If you're just going after CAS, and now this is where things are probably changing in Marine Corps aviation. So my East Coast squadron, like, we didn't have the new Cobra, which has since been upgraded to the Z, the Zulu. So we had the old school Whiskies with the two blades. Their sensor was a little bit, well, I wouldn't say a little bit. It was much less capable than the Huey sensor.
Okay.
So what you got with pairing up a Whiskey and a Yankee was, you got the Hellfire and the 20 mil off the Cobra.
Yeah.
But you got the extended range sensor from the Huey. And then we also carried, we have the 50 and the minigun, and then a myriad of rockets that we can shoot. But
you guys have 7-shot pods?
Yeah, we typically flew only the 7-shot. Sometimes you'd see, what is it? The Laos, the 61 is the 19-shot, but typically that was like the Cobra carried that. We would just carry the 7. With the Huey, the DAS mounts that basically the metal framework that's on the outside of the aircraft holding up the gun and the rocket pod. As soon as you put a big pod on there, like, we couldn't carry it fully loaded because of limitations on the mount, but it just got in the way. So the 7-shot pod was much easier, and typical loadout for like Afghanistan would be the 50 and mini. I think it was about 3,000 rounds on the mini gun, 650 cal, and then 7 HE rockets on one side, and then we'd carry 4 APK just because of the added weight and I guess maybe the numbers we had, but we just carried 4 APK.
Okay. And you're talking APKWS, the laser guided?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And I think they're straying away from, I think APKWS was kind of the term, and it still is. Now they're calling them AGR 19s, Alphas, Bravos. They've done a lot with that. They put more HE in to make it like a 10-pound warhead. And
that was more of our first episode, we talked about that. That was originally more of a Navy weapon, so that makes sense you guys are having them. We in the Army didn't really get them. First time I saw them was my last deployment, which was 2018.
Okay.
And we had a handful of them. But okay. So when you guys were doing stuff with the Cobras, I mean, even those older Cobras, were you typically sensor and then guiding any munitions from the Cobra, or was it a sensor handover to the Cobra and then they would do their own lasing?
Yeah, it depends. It depends, obviously, right? Sure. Situation dependent, but a lot of times we would help. We would be talking to the JTAC on the ground from the Huey, or if lead was a Cobra, we would be listening, obviously, on TAD, so we'd hear everything. We were usually able to acquire sooner than the Cobra, just depending on environmentals and things like that, and then we could do inter-flight communications to the Cobra, get their sensor into the general area. And then obviously with the low threat in Afghanistan, we didn't have to maintain a whole lot of standoff. So unless they were bent or, their laser designator was not working, typically they would just self-laze their Hellfire.
Yeah.
Obviously if they were, having issues, then we could pick up the laze. Like, we're capable of doing that from the Huey as well.
Right. Well, any other kind of linkage with the other aircraft other than radios? Did you guys have Link 16 or any other kind of systems like that?
No, unfortunately not. And that's kind of the bane of my existence right now in my current job is trying to bring some of the units into the fold of Link 16, because it's an amazing capability that Marine Corps fixed wing does have, but on the ground we don't have Link 16, and rotor wing doesn't have Link 16, which is kind of like you're only getting half the picture if your rotors aren't in the Link. But no, we didn't have Link at that time. We did have the capability. Are you familiar with the rover? Yeah. So we were able to pull the Cobra feed into the Huey on a tablet. So that made correlation a little bit easier, that we could see exactly what they were looking at on a tablet.
So you have a poor man's Link 16 going on with the tablet in the cockpit.
Yeah, and like huge kudos to the crew chiefs in the back of the Huey. I mean, those guys are incredible. Like, they're the ones who are like, they'll come out to the bird and they're like, "Hey, sir, I got this thing. Like, check this out. We can see everything the Cobra's watching on their TSS." And it's like, wow, how'd you do that? It's different generation. They're like electronic geniuses, and they know how all that stuff works. So
yeah, playing Xboxes and stuff. Yeah, that's
exactly.
For listeners who don't know what we're talking about. Rover is basically a system that allows JTACs on the ground, or really anyone who has access to the system, that they can tune in from and get a download from UAS, fixed wing, whoever happens to be able to transmit on this particular bandwidth. And it's obviously super helpful when you're on the ground and you can see a target and you're talking to an aircraft and trying to guide them in on that target. You can see what they see and say, okay, no, go north of what you're looking at right now, and things like that. So, but you guys essentially made that portable in the aircraft, and were able to use that. And in the Echo model Apache, we had pretty much that capability built in, where you could pull up the other guy's feed and look through their TADs and things like that. So yeah, the situational awareness comes with Link 16 and comes with those sort of data links is incredible. And you don't know it until you play with it. Like, it's, as a 58 guy, I was very comfortable with just using the radio, and just saying, hey, to your left, okay, yeah, 11 o'clock, something. Once you get into that world where you do have that sort of technology and that capability, it is really hard to go back. Very hard, because you have just such situational awareness, especially at night. It's incredible. So, but yeah, it's I'm jealous that all the fixed wing guys have had that stuff for so long, but it's really missed out in the rotary wing world.
Yeah, and it's funny, not to rag on Bell or the Marine Corps, DoD at large, but it's funny, we come out with this brand new helicopter, and we don't have VDL in the Huey, so we're pushing Cobra video to the guys on the ground, and so I guess that was kind of helpful to see that link. So you hear the JTAC talking about what he's seeing from the downlink from the Cobra. It looks nothing like the Huey picture, obviously. So then being able to like pull up the tablet and see exactly what everyone is talking about was super helpful.
So you do have some cargo space, obviously, in the Huey. What kind of packs are you able to carry? How does that affect your weapons load? Like, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I would say at any given time, with a full ordnance load, we could comfortably 3 to 4 Marines in the back. And then you get into the weird thing with, and I don't know if 60s are the same way, but seats in, seats out, combat, not combat, right. Over water, not over water, day, night. The list goes on. But at any given time, with the 50 cal and the minigun, you could comfortably get 3 guys in the back if you had to get them out of somewhere or insert somewhere. And that's another thing that's great about the Huey. It's so versatile. If we get fragged for a mission, say it's we're coming on shift, it's midnight, and at 6 o'clock they want to do an insert of a 12-man team. Easy day. Like, we just go out to the aircraft. They may even strip the pods off. Try not to do that because they're bore sided to the aircraft. Right. But just pull the guns off, throw on 240s, and we can just run dual 240s, and then throw all the seats in and probably carry at least 6 per aircraft with their 2 crew chiefs in the back as well. So I haven't really seen more than 6. That's about max for the back of the Huey.
Okay. Was that something that was commonly happening in a deployed environment or no?
Yeah, it would happen. You kind of, so for people that aren't familiar, there's ASRs and JTAR support, essentially, for at least for what we were typically seeing. So assault support requests, which was people, gear, resupplies, things like that. And then JTAR was a joint tactical air request. And that was more of CAS. You can think of them two different ways. So for the ASR mission, we typically would fly that at night. And it's funny, both my deployments, I worked the midnight to noon shift. So I did a lot of ASR support between like midnight and 5:30. Yeah. But yeah, we would typically, run people. So I was at Bastion, and we would people would meet us up at the hangar. We'd throw all their gear, 5-6 packs in the back, and then run them out to a fob. We usually would do that for that smaller scale. We like to have the Cobra with us, obviously for more firepower and, talking tactics and mechanics. Like we would always just split the section going into the LZ. So we would maintain like 1,000 and below. They would have 1,500 and above. And then they would basically just be our eyes in the sky for anyone that tried to shoot at us on ingress to the LZ.
Yeah, so let's go back to something you'd mentioned before, talking about the roles between the Marines and the Army, because that's a good point that a lot of people sometimes get a little bit confused on it. Particularly in the Army, sometimes we get confused on this ourselves. So, like you said, Army aviation is considered more of a maneuver asset. So, a way to describe that is the way I always try to tell guys is, okay, picture a tank. Okay, now just picture that tank flying. Essentially the same thing. So, how would you expect your tanks to operate? That is how we would operate versus the Marines typically, like you said, is considered more of a supporting role in the sense that close air support. Like you guys are from a doctrinal standpoint, close air support, whereas Army aviation would not be for the shooters. You guys are getting 9 lines. You guys are talking to JTACs, whereas we're typically not. We can, but we typically don't. Well, I think that's the fundamental issue that sometimes we run into when we work with Marines or vice versa is understanding that we do have a common language. We just happen to be doing things a little bit differently. And I've certainly seen people get tripped up on that.
Yeah, totally. I've definitely worked with some, there's a lot of Apaches at Bastion. They were primarily British guys. Yeah. But yeah, just the techniques and the tactics are just totally different. I'd see them go into a 2,000 foot hover hold and just drop 30 mil, which is extremely accurate. I mean, with that cannon, I mean, it's incredibly accurate, but just completely different than, how H1s fly attacks and,
well, I think too,
kind of lend that support.
When you see other nations who do fly Apaches, they do things differently as well. I can't remember the last time I hovered in combat. Pretty much never. It's like landing. But you do see, like we've worked with the Dutch where I was at, and they flew Apaches, and yeah, they would do things differently as well. I mean, they would fly them incredibly low. At low altitudes that as Kiowa guys we would fly, but Apaches you wouldn't. American Apaches you wouldn't see down that low. So yeah, there's definitely some disparity when we talk about our foreign partners and how they fly some of those aircraft. But so tell us about deployment. So when did you deploy as a Huey guy, and tell us a little bit more about that? You did mention Bastion. Is that one deployment to Afghanistan? Did you do any more back to Iraq?
No. So after 2005, I was done in Iraq. Never went back there. But yeah. So I got to my first squadron in July, August of 2012, and then immediately started working up for Afghanistan deployment in 2013. So for the Marine Corps, kind of the center point, the focus point of all our training occurs at 29 Palms out in California. So just, hundreds of square miles of range space that we can go out there and simulate everything that we're going to do in combat. So we have, we could kind of branch off and talk about MAGTAF and the Marine Air Ground Task Force and how that's organized and who we're supporting. But all the elements of the MAGTAF are present at 29 Palms for these exercises. So all the planning, briefing, execution, all of that is done exactly how it will be done in combat. So we go out there prior to a deployment, and then sometimes you're even working with the people that are going to be on the ground. They're working for the exact same squadron that's going to be supporting them when they get to Afghanistan, which is pretty neat to kind of like build some of that those base relationships, establish TTPs and SOPs for when you get over there. Makes things a little bit more streamlined. But yeah, so 29 Palms with HMLA 167 East Coast Squadron. And then in about May of 2013, we deployed over to Camp Bastion, got there, and then, it's a normal deployment for us.
How long are your deployments?
For us, it's 6 months.
Okay.
So a little bit shorter, I think, than most of the Army units were doing at the time. You guys were like 9 months to 12 months.
Yeah, I think by that time it was back to 9 months. We were doing solid 12 months there for the longest time. But when you guys deploy, do you fall in on aircraft that are already there? Do you typically take all your own? Is it kind of a mix?
Yeah, it's a mix, right? So we do fall in. I'd say we fall in on about like 95% of the aircraft. They're already there in Bastion. When I flew over there, I rode over in a C-17 from Cherry Point, and it had, I want to say, 2 Hueys and a Cobra in the back. We took that to Bastion, and then basically it was a swap, right? So they take 2 or 3 of their high time birds that need to go back to the States, throw them in the C-17 once we offload ours, and then it kind of rotates like that. Yeah. So yeah, we bring a few aircraft in, but we do for that deployment, we brought just about the entire squadron. We did have a small det that came out here to Okinawa to support UDP, which is the unit deployment program. Just kind of having an HMLA presence in the Pacific, because there is no organic light attack squadron in the Pacific. That's Iwakuni and Okinawa. Obviously, and that's the Marine Corps. The Army has their all of their aircraft here as well. But so yeah, we split the squadron a little bit, but for the most part, it was a full squadron going to Afghanistan. And same day to day that you would have anywhere else, fixing aircraft, flying aircraft, testing aircraft. You just have that added mission that you're doing it for real. You're doing your job.
Yeah, it's a lot like being at home, just with less choices for dinner. I mean,
exactly.
The schedule is pretty much the same. You're flying, guys are working, the lights are always on at the hangar. Yeah. Deploying to Afghanistan is certainly a challenge for everyone, but there's no port, so getting your stuff there, a lot of stuff has got to come in. So bringing in aircraft is definitely challenging. And yeah, we had the same issues where pretty much you fell in on some stuff there. Getting in and out of Iraq is obviously much easier because you've got the ports down there. But okay, so What's your current job?
Right now, I'm an air officer at 5th Anglo-Co. So I'm one of several JTACs up there, but we typically have you'll see 3 like people that hold the position of air officer. We have a company air officer, and then looking at Anglo-Co's kind of composition, we have 2 brigades, and so a 1st Brigade air officer and a 2nd Brigade air officer.
And tell us, what does Anglo-Co stand for?
Oh, sorry. So yeah, Anglo-Co is it's kind of unique to the Marine Corps. I know the Army has something very similar. Drawing a blank on what they call that. But Anglo-Co is Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. And so the whole concept of that is that we provide a liaison capability to the MAGTF commander, right? So we don't necessarily work direct, like they won't task an Anglico to a company, a Marine Corps company or platoon. We're typically going to be working with those partner nations in an adjacent battle space or adjacent to the MAGTF, and working that liaison and coordination piece back to the MAGTF commander. So we're primarily composed of artillery Marines, communications Marines, and then we have a handful of pilots that serve as the air officer, JTAC, although a lot of our O8s are JTACs as well. That's kind of where the pilots come into, because obviously we understand that air picture a little bit better, sure, and are able to manage that. And then we also have a handful of joint fire observers, typically Lance Corporal to sergeants, that are acting as a JFO out there. Lines 4 and 6.
Yeah. And what you're referring to, of course, the 9 line 4 being the target elevation, yep, and then 6 being the grid. So yeah, I can remember these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the Air Force equivalent to that would be like a TACP, Tactical Air Control Party, where you've got the air liaison officer, and he's got his JTACs and what do they call them? ROMADs, I think, the radio operators. Army, we have you've got the BAO, Brigade Aviation Officer, which is a lot more integrated with the brigade. So, for instance, if I go to be a BAO, I do work for that brigade commander, that infantry brigade commander that I'm assigned to and on his staff. So it's not really a job that guys typically want, because you are disconnected from aviation, and you're at that point, you're kind of at the whim of this infantry or armor brigade and doing what they want to do. But so for the Anglico, is that a job that guys look for? Is it something that you pretty much guaranteed you're going to get it at some time? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it really does depend on a lot of different things. Just like Alex was saying in the last one, we don't call them a disassociated sea tour, but a B billet or a ground tour is kind of expected in the Marine Corps. You go to your first squadron. So I was in the East Coast from 12 until 2017. So at that point, I did the deployment with 167, kind of circling back, but I came back from that deployment. The CO was like, hey, who wants to come back here in 6 months? And I was the only single captain at the time. I raised my hand. I was like, yeah, I'll come back. So I went to another squadron from the East Coast, HMLA 467, which was up at Cherry Point. Deployed with them back, same exact place. Like I probably slept in the same bed. Went back to Bastion, did that, and then came back, finished up my time with the HMLA with the UDP I mentioned. I came out here to Okinawa, flew out here for 6 months, and then went home, and then PCS'd out here. But yeah, it's kind of expected that after your 4 to 5 years in your first squadron, you're going to do something different, whether that's school, or you could get follow-on orders to aviation, such as HMX-1. What I did, I came out here and flew station, so Marine Corps Air Station Support Aircraft, OSA, which is flying the UC-12 and UC-35. You're going to do something outside of your fleet aircraft. Okay. And it's not looked bad upon. There are certain ones that are better than others. I would say Anglico or Recon are some pretty good ones to be involved with, because the tempo is pretty high. You're constantly doing things and doing training with other Marines. And
right. Yeah, it's muddy boots jobs, and that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So you do get to fly, though, if you're an Anglico and you're co-located, you're able to do some flying, or no?
No.
Okay.
So the Marine Corps has DIFOP and DIFTIN orders. So DIFOP is basically means you're in a billet where you're going to be in a flying capacity, and DIFTIN means flying activities denied, or you won't be flying.
Okay.
So you can get a there's a DIFTN waiver that you can go about getting. So if I was a little less busy at work, I could probably get a DIFTN waiver and still fly the C-12. But we're pretty busy up there on Camp Hansen, so I have not really looked into that, and I'm rotating back to the States here in a few months. So, but yeah, it's, you'll do the ground tour, and then depending on your qualifications and kind of needs of the Marine Corps determines what happens next. I'm in a weird spot, so I'm going to be going to Quantico, where my wife is stationed. So I won't be flying there, unfortunately. So I'm holding out, fingers crossed for my my Twilight tour to be a flying job.
Well, yeah, well, that's I think I try to highlight as much as I can with people is just understand it. If you are interested in a military aviation career, that you got to expect that at some point you're not going to be wiggling sticks. You know, it's just the reality of the job. Yep. And I don't care what branch you are, what rank you are. That there's some job somewhere out there where unfortunately you're not going to get to fly. But it sounds like you guys in the Marines have at least pretty much codified that as say there's no question. Sometimes you'll get into jobs in the Army, like for instance the job I have now. If I really pushed it, I could go fly, even though I am in no way, shape, or form associated with the aviation unit here. But then it's a question of, okay, well, how much time do I want to devote into doing it? Because as you know, there's a lot of baggage that comes with being on flight status, and all the requirements to keep up with, and hours you've got to fly and stuff. So at some point you start weighing it against your job and what else you got going on, and figuring out if you can hack it. But okay, so moving on in a few months, and I think that's a good place to kind of wrap up for now. I would like to probably circle back sometime in the future, and maybe pull a little bit more on the thread of the Anglico and certainly some more about the Huey. But before we go, why don't you give us a good deployment story, something exciting?
All right. So I'll tell you about my first deployment in 2013, and it's kind of a touchy subject, I guess, for me. Sometimes it's still even kind of makes me uncomfortable, or honestly, it kind of scares me how this thing turned out. So it was my first deployment. It was actually my third flight in country. So typically you'll do a few flights with the squadron you're replacing, just kind of basic AO, how do things work here?
Left seat, right seat, right.
Yeah, left seat, right seat, exactly. So this was my first flight with a member of my squadron. And again, it was about midnight 30, and we were doing ASR support, so that assault support role for this first mission. So about looking at a 2-hour flight, all around Helmand, going to different FOBs, dropping off things, people, and then coming back to Bastion was the plan. We launched out of there with a Cobra, so it was a mixed section, and we left Bastion. On goggles, we fly out. I was in the right seat, flying there, and then for the Marine Corps quals, I was a basic co-pilot. I had my low light time, and then the left seater, the aircraft commander, was a WTI, a weapons and tactics instructor, which is the highest qual that the Marine Corps produces in aviation.
Sure. That's kind of like Top Gun-ish, right? I mean, that's somewhat equivalency, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a 2-month course in Yuma. They go out there and they do like full mission profile flying. It's academic intensive. Most WTIs are extremely proficient and competent, and they're great pilots. Anyways, I had this WTI in the left seat. We launched out, and he's like, "Hey, Andrew, take the sticks, fly the first hour or so." So I go into a couple of zones. Everything is fine. And then we kind of hit some confusion. One of the Marines in the back spoke up and was like, "Hey, I was supposed to get off at this FOB, but no one told me to get off." And so we're like, "Okay." We look at the gas. We talk to the Cobra. Yeah, okay, we can get you back to that FOB, and then we'll still have enough fuel to return to Bastion. So at this point, the left seater, WTI. He's like, hey man, I'm going to take the controls. I'll fly this one. So I've got about maybe 250, 300 hours in the Huey at this point. So I'm like, all right, cool. So he's flying. Now, typically we fly at medium altitude in Afghanistan. So 1,500 feet for the guys listening. It's just to keep us outside of pretty much the WES for the majority of weapons that were in Afghanistan at the time. So AK-47s and RPGs, 1,500 feet keeps you pretty safe. And then also flying at night helps out a lot. So
yeah, because there's no contrast too when you're flying low in the desert under goggles. I mean, it's tough unless you get super low, and then you'll start to see contrast. But by then you don't want to be there. But yeah, flying up at altitude is definitely that. We did the same thing. So.
Yep. So this is the first point where I probably should have known something was wrong, or maybe should have spoken up. So he flew the entire leg up to this next fob. Probably it was only about a 15-minute flight straight up the Helmand River. He flew the whole thing at about 300 feet. I didn't say anything. I was just like, well, he's the WTI. It's his aircraft. I'm just going to let this go. It's okay. And of course, it's fun flying low.
Sure.
So we're going and we make our right turn. It's basically a right 90 into the zone. So we make our right turn. We're at about 200 feet, 120 knots or so. And slang term in rotor wing community is a hockey stop. Like basically you pull back on the cyclic, push the collective down, and kind of use the rotor as a big air brake.
Yeah.
So we make our right 90 into the zone. He does this hockey stop to slow us down and get us to kind of intercept a landing profile for the zone, which is inside HESCO barrier, which is basically the metal
giant sandbag.
Yeah, giant sandbag. Yeah. So it's enclosed around this HESCO barriers. I'm looking out over the dash, trying to stay contact on the zone, and I'm listening up to the crew chiefs are calling out airspeed and altitude, and then I just hear them yell. I hear one of the crew chiefs yell airspeed, and I kind of like snap out of looking at the zone, and I look down and out of the window. We had doors on, and I can see the ground, and I can see that we're not really moving. And then I look inside, and on our MFD, I can see that we're at basically 0 knots ground speed, which is a bad place to be when you're super heavy. We had full load of ordnance. We had 4 British Marines in the back, and then 1 Marine Corps staff sergeant, 2 crew chiefs. So we were sitting at 4, 5, 6, 7 people in the back. And yeah, the WTI attempted to recover it, pushed the nose over, pulled all the collective we had, which will cause loss of tail rotor effectiveness, or LTE. So we entered a right descending spiral, fell
Under
about
goggles.
100 under goggles. Yep. Everything in the cockpit is just like screaming at us, like lights are going off, like over torquing. It was quite the experience. So we spun 270 degrees and fell about 150 feet. We hit the ground right outside the fob. Skids broke off. We were just sitting on the belly of the aircraft. I thought I died. I could, there was nothing you could do. I pushed my hands against the dashboard as hard as I could to try and prevent my face from smacking, knocking out. So I just pushed as hard as I could. We hit the ground, and my goggles fell off or went black. The MFDs went black. I was like, I just died. And then I came out of it. I hear the engine still turning, and we just executed our procedures, which were a little non-standard. I had to have the crew chiefs get out and actually like cut the fuel manually to the engines because I couldn't do that from the cockpit. But yeah, we got out and, the rest is history. We had a lengthy investigation process. Took us both out of flying for about 5 weeks. And is one of those things where in hindsight, the result of the investigation board was, for me, they told me that I should have been more assertive, which in hindsight, yeah, I should have definitely spoke up and said something or called wave off much earlier than we got into our situation where we couldn't recover. But it was a good lesson. Unfortunately, it was learned the hard way. But I was able to take that forward as an instructor later on and, remind the new guys coming up, like, just because I've got, over 1,000 hours and I've deployed multiple times in this aircraft, like, I will kill you just as fast as you can kill me. So that was kind of the big lesson there was, yeah, your instructor's got experience, but this thing's a helicopter and it's not supposed to fly. And it will turn on you very, very quickly. So that was the biggest thing. But yeah, I got back to flying on that deployment, and maybe that's why I went back the second time. Maybe I just felt like I kind of got gypped a little bit on my first one and wanted to redo it. Yeah. But yeah, everything worked out and no one was hurt. Thank God in that crash. Yeah. Everyone was perfectly fine.
Yeah. I mean, you're touching on a lot of things that are certainly hammered home in flight school. And I'm sure it's the same for you guys and yours. You talk about excessive professional courtesy, and that was one that was always drummed into our heads about, your instructor pilot. Yes, you're automatically going to look at him as if he has all the answers, but the reality is he doesn't, because the conditions are going to change. And sometimes what comes with experience also comes with a little bit of an ego. And I don't know the background of why the maneuvers were taken the way they were in your situation, but it can certainly happen that somebody just finds themselves in a situation that they're just not prepared for, or, their confidence is just greater than it should be for the situation. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge lesson for someone that, that was fairly early on in your career. It's good that you were able to walk away from that and live with that experience. But you see it all the time with new guys. And unfortunately, you see it a lot of times with experienced guys, because it is that confidence issue. And that's the perfect storm. And you've got somebody that's overconfident with somebody that is new, because they're very unlikely to say something.
Yep, 100%.
Because, it's the fear of being wrong, right? I mean, it's the fear, well, if I say something to him and all this works out fine, well, he's going to think I'm a coward, or, any number of things. And you just don't want that. But at the same time, you also don't want to spread the skids. So you got to speak up. And night flying, I mean, the most conservative approach. I'm always a big fan of just taking the most conservative approach with all of my maneuvers, unless someone's shooting at me, then okay, you're going to bend it over and do things that you shouldn't. But landing at an LZ at night when no one's shooting at you, you definitely want to take it low and slow and work your way down. But yeah, I'm glad to see that you guys made it out of that. That's incredible. I mean, that's no mean feat. It probably doesn't sound like much maybe to people, like, oh, it felt like 100 feet. Yeah, okay, that's a long ways to fall in an aircraft. And like you said, that sort of jarring, impact and your sensory overload. I was shot in Iraq flying, and
wow.
In the aircraft, just like you're describing, a lot of things happened to the aircraft at the same time, and so we were getting a lot of indications of things that had gone wrong, and to couple that with your own body telling you that something is wrong, it is overwhelming. So I can only imagine the way it felt for you.
Wow! So you were actually shot while flying?
Yeah. Christmas Day, 2006. So
Merry Christmas!
Celebrate my my anniversary with Sparky. I keep them in a jar, but yeah, I've got this little 762 reminder of Iraq. But no, all good. Well, cool. Yeah, I think that'll probably wrap it up for this one. And that was a good story and honestly a good lesson. I mean, it can happen, and again, I'm not trying to throw stones at the other guy. I don't know the background and I may be implying that he did something on purpose. I'm not. It can happen to anyone, regardless of your experience level, regardless of your rank. You should definitely, back up your left or right seat or front back seat or whatever you got and make sure that they're all plugging away, upstairs, because it's very easy to kind of lose track of what you're doing. Sometimes, you get into a rhythm, and it sounds like you guys were kind of in a rhythm too. I mean, I'm sure for this guy, it was an everyday occurrence to do these things, but
yep.
Yeah. So definitely complacency kills. You hear that all the time, and it is absolutely true.
Definitely true.
So, well, cool, man. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your experiences with us and talking about the marine aviation. I know we did touch on the flight school training, but there is some variations there as you guys get further along in the process. And I appreciate you shedding some light on that and talking to us a little bit about the Huey. Of course, I'm gonna have to hit you up for your wife because I need a Cobra pilot. So
yeah, right.
But no, I appreciate you spending the time on your Saturday morning, and yeah, we'll have you back on, I'm sure, in the future.
Got it, Brian. Thanks so much.
Well, Kelly, that was quite a story from Andrew. What did you think about that crash?
Unfortunately, it's probably close to being typical in a lot of crashes, I would assume. It's scary. It's scary to know that. There's an interesting a story about an general aviation flight. It was a commercial flight, and it was the first officer was highly, highly rated. No, I'm sorry, the captain was like highly rated, had 10,000 hours or whatever, and there was a new guy, right? New guy in the right seat, and things started going wrong, and he questioned the captain, and the captain basically just said, like, hey, shut up, I know what I'm doing. And you could hear through the audio tapes of the NTSB crash that he questioned him like twice, but he was a new guy, so he didn't want to question the authority of this senior captain, and they wound up, of course, crashing and killing everybody on board. And the NTSB found that the co-pilot, even though he was a brand new first officer, not having the wherewithal to basically tell the captain, okay, this is happening, and you have to take this action. He wasn't forceful enough, even though he knew they were in dire a serious problem. Yeah. So it's unfortunately that's kind of the way it is with new people, right? In any job, you have a veteran on the job with you, and you're supposed to be learning from them, and if something. If you see something that's not right, a lot of people hesitate to call that out because it's like, well, what the hell do I know? I'm a beginner, So, yeah, that's kind of scary in a way.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way around it. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if you speak up and it turns out you're wrong, right. You could have a credibility issue at that point. But if you're right and you don't say anything, bad things could happen. Yeah. So it's a tough situation to be in. And, and I feel now that I know some guys who've gotten out of the military, particularly like you're talking about, and going into the airlines, there's no relationship there. I was surprised to know this. No. Guys are showing up and they don't even know who they're flying with till they show up to the aircraft, essentially.
Oh yeah. You'll have some guys who fly continuous legs together, and usually those are, a lot of overseas flights. But yeah, those guys, they'll meet. Some of those people maybe will fly once a month or maybe once every 2 months with the same person. Yeah. Right. It's like, oh yeah, didn't I fly a leg to Chicago with you? It's like, yeah, I think so. That's it. Yeah. Right. But that's why there's a lot of rules that that the FAA has in place. That, no small chatting, talking below 10,000 feet, things like that. There's a lot of rules. So they don't, get into conversation or get too familiar with each other until it's time. But it's a super interesting thing. But you're absolutely right. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Yeah. Right. But I can tell you, if I have a good sense that my life's in danger, I don't care if that's a 4-star sitting in that left seat. I'm doing something different, right? But easier said than done.
Yeah. No, it's true. Well, we're glad that that turned out as well as it did. But I appreciate him coming on and spending some time with us. And speaking of appreciation, I want to say some thank you to our recent Patreon. So we did set up a Patreon to help support the channel and its growth and continuation. So we've got some different tiers, and I just want to say thanks to these people and kind of talk about that for a second. So our first tier is the crew chief tier, and that we currently have some guys, Cam Flip and Philip Kuffner, are supporting that. And with that tier, they get early access to these episodes, so they get them 3 or 4 days before we put them out on the mainstream. For our next tier, we've got what we call the mission pilot tier, and we have Jeanette Appleby, Nick Greenaway, let's see who else, Philip Sobel, and Lee. So I appreciate you guys supporting the channel, supporting the show, and they'll get early access as well as access to our special after hours, I guess you could say, bonus material. So typically what I do is with whoever I'm interviewing, I finish recording and then I keep recording and say, hey, tell me a good story. So we'll spend another 20, 30 minutes having a chat about something that either happened to them on a deployment or in training or things like that. So you'll get access to that if you're a mission pilot or in the higher tier, the flight lead. So we have 2 new flight leads. We have Chase and Dami. So I appreciate you guys supporting us as well. And in addition to everything that we just mentioned, what we're looking to do is every month have some sort of online get-together with our flight leads and have a little Q&A, BNS section, and just talk about whatever. Still trying to figure out what the best venue and time of that is, so I'm going to send out a message here pretty soon about that and try to get that worked up. But greatly appreciate those guys supporting us, guys and gals, I should say, supporting us on the channel with Patreon. But you can support us too just by hitting like and subscribing to this and leaving a comment. Those things really help out. It helps out the algorithms and all that jazz. So anything that you guys are willing to do to support the show is greatly appreciated. So, well, am I missing anything? Have we pretty much hit all the nails?
Yeah, I think so. It's just, this is a new year, and 2020 is behind us, and going to this new, and if COVID taught us anything, it's been horrible to see the suffering that's been going around in 2020, and we're going to probably be going through it for a little bit in 21. But I mean, one thing it's really, I guess, taught me over the past year is slow down. I get to telework from home. I work from home. I've been doing that for a year now. And it's been good. It's been time with the family. So if there's anything that's good and positive that's come out of this COVID is the understanding of people's health and also how important friends and family are. So I hope we carry that into 21. So I'm super excited about what you're doing and the clan that you're leading and the charge that you're taking. I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Yep, and we're happy to have you. And it's been a big help so far, and we've got nothing but good stuff ahead of us on the show. So I appreciate your help and appreciate all you guys out there listening. Comments made by the guests and hosts are our own and not representative of the Department of Defense or any private business. Appreciate you listening. Check out our website, check out our Instagram, and again, hit that subscribe and like as much as you can. We appreciate you listening. We'll talk to you guys later. Take care.